The king is dead, and it's up to you to claim back what is rightfully yours. Everything. In Royal Punks, you will play as one of those said punks trying to claim all the power that has been left from the king's demise. Now, there are many ways for you to prove your right to the throne. First, you can prove you're simply just the greatest of all the punks. Maybe you'll make all the cities bow down to your will, or simply just eliminate the competition. We'll see which strategy is the best for you in this Roll for Crit preview. Roll for Crit was contacted and paid in order to make this preview for this game's crowdfunded campaign. All items shown here are a prototype of the game and are subject to change in the final version of the game. In order to claim victory in Royal Punks, you must complete one of the 3 possible objectives. A, you can capture all 5 city tiles. B, eliminate all your other opponents. Or C, level up your Royal Punk to 7. You can do any of these objectives in order to win, and obviously depending on the state of the game, one may be an easier path than the other. The game board itself is somewhat modularized with random tiles. However, you do it by rings, with stronger tiles being closer to the center tile always being the same, with the neutral mob always starting in that tile. Now, the other players actually have their own separate tiles, which after the board is set up, you will choose where to place your tile where your starting location will be. But now let's zoom in on the tiles to see what they do. These are your basic tiles and your basic units you come across the game. While some of the models may differ, their rules should be the same regardless of color. Now, there are military units and structures. Structures are going to be how you gain control of different territories along the map. This one being your mansion, it will always start on your starting hex, and honestly, it's your most important of them all. For as long as the mansion's standing, regardless of what happens to your big boss, your Royal Punk, you're still in the game. However, should your mansion be destroyed, then the next time your Royal Punk would be captured, they're killed instead, and therefore you're eliminated from the game. These are your basic resource structures. They're going to go on the resource producing tiles, but keep in mind that if any time you're not there and an opponent comes and goes into a tile with an unprotected building, if it's a resource one, they're automatically going to switch it with one of their own. And if it's your mansion, they automatically destroy it. So it's probably best that you make sure that your buildings are well guarded, or at the very least, not near where enemies are. But these are the military troops that will do said guarding, or probably more likely, be on the offensive. This is your Royal Punk. It's the big boss. In some ways, your strongest unit, as not only does it give it a die in combat, but it also is one of the ways to win by leveling it to level 7. However, it's also a big target, as it can be defeated and either captured or, as I said earlier, your mansion's destroyed, make it so you are eliminated from the game. This is artillery. Artillery allows you to roll a special die before combat begins, which could really devastate the enemy. And in some instances, maybe devastate opponents in battles you're not even in. Then there are commandos. They're smaller Royal Punks, basically to help you move around your basic units. These little guys, who will be your main guard and offense force, or probably very likely your main cannon fodder. Now, let's go over the tiles. These 2 are the resource tiles that these buildings are going to be built on. There are the white ones, which produce the troops, and these black forest ones, which produce gold. Now, the number tells you how much gold or troops they'll produce at the start of your turn. Your initial tile will always be a 1 troop tile. Now, some tiles might have this pattern on the side. It means no matter what, no mini can cross over that line, pretty much being an impenetrable barrier. Now, forests do have a unique ability in the sense that cannon dice cannot be rolled in any battle involved in a forest. Basically, there's too much cover for them to be able to actually get a good shot in. Now, the city tiles are a bit more unique, as they don't give you a benefit right away, but rather are powerful from their more passive abilities. If you are attacked, you get this extra die to roll, as it's just harder to siege a city. Also, if any cannons are in cities, they can technically participate in battles that are adjacent to that tile. They won't count as a force that can be killed, but if a battle is happening in an adjacent tile, like let's say we had some things going on here, then you will still get to roll the cannon die as if it's in that tile and possibly help out the battle. It doesn't need to be you involved in battle. It could be a fight between 2 different players, and you can still decide to fire your cannon in there. Though keep in mind, as I said before, forests can never have the cannon involved in, as there's too much cover. Finally, if you control the most cities on your turn, it'll give you a chance to move the mob. This is a neutral character, however, it's one that you should still fear. For whenever they move, into a hex containing any kind of military troops, then they have to kill one military troop. It doesn't matter whether it's just these little guys or if it had some of the more bigger, expensive guys. While the mob may be a threat to all your soldiers, they do recognize that you are one of the candidates for the crown, and they respect you for that. After all, you may be a punk, but you are the royal punk. So even if you share a space with the mob, they won't hurt your royal punk directly. Finally, there are these fire tiles. They act like the barriers. Basically, you can never enter them. They act as a barricade for everything. So let's actually explain a starting turn and therefore how you actually complete one of those winning objectives. At the start of your turn, you're going to generate resources. These will be from buildings on resource tiles, including your mansion. You'll make a number of troops to spawn there equal to what's printed on the card. So in this case, 2 troops. Next, you will generate gold based on the 4 spaces you have buildings. You will always generate 2 gold, but you'll generate more gold based on what's printed. So for example, this gives us an extra 3 gold, bringing us up to 5 gold. This is how you're going to be able to play actions. But before we get to that, we need to talk about the mob. Afterwards, if you control the most city tiles, you're going to be able to move the mob. If you're tied, you'll only be able to move the mob once. If you're not tied, you can move it up to 2 hexes. Each time it enters a hex, like these 2, it takes out 1 military unit. If it's on a hex with a building, that hex is in essence turned off, meaning no one's going to be able to gain its benefits while the mob is there. After all of that is done, you may now start spending your gold in order to take actions. One of the main ways you're going to spend gold is to, well, buy stuff. You can buy certain units. For example, cannons cost 3, commanders cost 2, and the buildings cost 1. They can be placed anywhere you already have troops, though only 1 building per hex. You can also spend gold for these power cards. These have extremely strong effects, such as spawning troops right away, destroying half your opponent's army in a battle, and just messing around with your opponent's troops and other silly shenanigans. Finally, you can spend 1 gold to move either a royal punk or a commander. Whenever they move, they can take as many troops as they want with them. If they move into a hex that has an undefended building, then you automatically capture it, or if it's a mansion, it would be destroyed. If you ever do move into a hex that contains another player, then a battle will commence. The first thing you're going to do is roll the cannon die for every cannon involved in the battle. Remember, this won't happen if the battle is happening in a forest. This will include any cannon involved in the battle itself, as well as any cannons in adjacent cities, even if they don't belong to any of the warring armies. Make sure you roll for each cannon, removing troops from your opponent's side. If you're not part of the battle, you will choose who you're shooting. Then each player is going to form their dice pool. Each player automatically gets 3 white dice, no matter what units are involved. If your royal punk is in the battle, you're going to add your royal punk's personal die. After that, these are more unique conditions. First, if your royal punk is ever levels 3 through 6, they're going to get this special super punk die. It's a 1 in 6 chance of getting a hit, but it still is always helpful. If they're in a city, they get the city defense die if they're on the defense. And finally, there are ways that you may be able to capture opponents' punk dice, but we'll get to that after we explain winning and losing battles. Once everything is set up, you will roll and start fighting. Depending on the number of skulls rolled will determine the outcome. Whoever rolled the least amount of skulls has to either lose 1 troop on the board or lower their punk 1 level. If there is ever a tie, both players are going to take a loss. This will keep going with players losing minis as well as going down in level until someone has hit -1. There, they can make a choice. They can choose to retreat with any troops they have and then therefore go down another level. However, that means they get to fight another day. If they don't choose to do so, then you're going to continue fighting until one side has lost all strength. That means all non-punk minis are off the board, and if there are royal punks involved, they have reached -3. When you have done so, you have either captured or defeated and killed your rival punk. So let's go over what happens after you win a battle. Now, regardless of whether you were able to bring your opponent's forces down to 0 or if their punk was there and retreated, that means you've won the battle. First, you're going to go up 1 on your level regardless. Remember, if you hit 7, you win the game. Next, if any of your opponent's buildings there, be it those resource buildings or the mansion, you will convert the resource buildings to your own, and if it's a mansion, destroy it. Finally, if there's a royal punk there that has hit -3, then you have either captured or killed the punk. If their mansion is still standing, then you have captured them. You're going to attach this chain around them, showing that you now hold them captive. Not only are you in control of the captive, But for now on with future fights with your punk, not only will you add your own die, you'll add the captive's punk's die as well. Keep in mind though, if you are ever involved in another battle with a player, and let's say you actually lose and decide by retreating, then that punk is either set free if their own forces were able to defeat you, or is now captured by the new army to add their die to their fights. Things are a little different, however, if the mansion is gone. If a punk ever hits -3 and they don't also control their mansion, that player is eliminated from the game. You remove all their pieces from the board, and their die is permanently yours, as you were the one to deal the final blow. After you have spent as much gold as you want, you can end your turn, passing it to the next player, who repeats the process until one player either controls all the cities, eliminates all the players, or has reached level 7 on their punk, and then therefore is declared the winner. Now, obviously, you can tell this is made for people who really enjoy that moving troops controlling, and definitely those who like to play maybe a bit more aggressively. Now, that's usually attached to 4X style games, and there's definitely a bit more asymmetry with different groups. Here, they play mostly the same, and they don't have all the different abilities of like exploring and revealing. It's simply just strengthen your army so you can bash skulls with your fellow punks. And this has sort of that dystopian, wild, Fallout kind of style of the Wild Waste and, people declaring themselves royals because they said so and they found a crown somewhere. But I feel a lot of that theme's going to actually come through the way you fight with each other. Because when I think of those moments, they're usually much more aggressive, and that's going to be what's happened here. I think there might be a strategy of leaving your royal punk behind and trying to play a bit more defensively. But all the games I played, I don't think anyone played defensively if they weren't on the back foot because they just lost a few battles. Usually people were going to charge in with their royal punk and just try to take up as much space as possible and knock out as many troops as possible. This, of course, could lead to some really swingy, hilarious battles because those dice sometimes just don't roll in your favor, and you might have to take that retreat option even though you came in with many more troops. Still, it becomes really interesting how you have to decide where to go and how to go in. You could stay on the outside where usually you're probably more safe, but the tiles aren't as strong. But diving in deeper is going to probably bring you not in more conflict just with other people, but also the mob as it starts in the center. So it's probably moving generally in that area, but there are stronger tiles there. Getting 3 gold on your turn alone is worth 3 tiles on the outside. And that basically gives you a free production building, and you can get another one of those power cards before you even think of spending the original 2 you get. And those cards are really powerful, so much so that just owning them was a threat. It wasn't even like you needed a specific one that would help you. You never know if your opponent had the one that would hurt them for whatever they were planning. Maybe they were trying to move in and you just take out some of their troops. Maybe they thought you had a weak spot and then you're like, surprise, I'm adding troops there. My favorite actually is one that lets you, it's bribing your opponent's commander to move. Now they get to move troops with the commander, but I use it to basically say, hey, I want you to move there and start a fight with that person. So even though it's my turn, I just basically got to watch 2 people duke it out just because I pointed over there and say, go over there. So there's plenty of these moments where things are going to swing each way because of the randomness of the dice, because of the cards, but it's not random enough where you feel like nothing matters. It's just going to give you those moments when you never know what the outcome truly is until you finally clash, which even makes those moments when you can run away not always feeling like the right option. There are plenty of times when you're standing there and you're like, now I could leave, but they're down to a few troops as well, and their royal punk is pretty low as well. I could stay. I still have good shot at this. I'm still rolling 4 dice because my punk is there. So you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to stay. Let's see what this happens. And of course, even if you lose, as long as you still have your mansion, then your guy gets captured and maybe you might be able to get a comeback to get your guy back. Or, the other players see your punk has been captured and like, well, that guy gives an extra die now. If we can take out that player, we're going to get it. So it's great to capture an opponent's punk, but it also makes you a target. So there's always this back and forth in power. And with the exception of really one game where that was more, we weren't really as confident with starting placements and someone got knocked out in the first rounds, it didn't feel like snowballing too much until one player is just sort of able to take out enough players. And then the last player standing just couldn't defeat them in terms of that killing all other players. That, I will admit, was the main way people won. Cities are usually already fought over so much, it was hard to gain control of all of them. I assume maybe with randomness, if they're all really close to each other, that might make a better opportunity for that. But people are going to fight over them anyways because one, they like putting artillery there so they can just shoot around at anything adjacent to that. And two, moving that mob can be really mean. Remember how I said those inner tiles are more powerful in terms of giving you resources? Well, they don't mean much if the mob is standing on that tile. So those were often fought over, but it's still nice as another alternate win condition. And finally, of course, win enough battles with your punk, and if they can hit 7 without taking too many hits, then that's another sort of secret way you can sort of trick people and maybe fly under the radar with a win rather than just eliminating one from the game. So this is definitely a cutthroat game that really, I feel like, keeps a lot of tension because between the power cards and the dice, the game really can swing one way or another, but you can still stack the odds in your favor. And if you feel lucky, punk, maybe you can win even if you don't bring as many resources to the battle as your opponent. Now, if you're interested in learning more and trying out this game, you can check the link down below. I'll have it to the project where you can back it, or at the very least, learn more about the game and what the project has to offer. Let me know your thoughts on this game and what you think you would do. Would you declare yourself king in a situation like this, or would you let the others fight it out and maybe hope that you can pick off the weakest once the battling is done? Love to hear from you, but for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit preview.